Yeah. So I'd like to welcome everybody here. It's going to be a really interesting presentation about the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System. And we have for you here today 3 speakers. We've got Thomas Stockton, who is with the State Engineer's Office, the Bureau for Pueblos, Tribes, and Nations, the Litigation and Adjudication Program. Also, Nicole Greenspan is with that same organization, and Scott Caseman from the County of Santa Fe, who is also involved in producing the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System. And what we hope to cover tonight is what was in the handout that you should have gotten via email as part of the invitation, and also any questions that you have. So who is going to be speaking first?
I have a question. Can I help you out with the PA system so everybody can hear it?
Yes. The question was, can I help you out with the PA system so everybody can hear? The answer is yes.
Me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tomas Stockton, and I work for the New Mexico Office of the State Engineer, and as Lynn said, I work for the Bureau for Pueblos, Tribes, and Nations. And we're here tonight to talk with you about making well elections under the Aamodt Settlement Agreement, and if you want water service for the Pojoaque, through the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System. There's some handouts over there on that table if you haven't gotten any yet. And there's about 4 of them. One of the handouts is sort of just an invitation that the Tesuque Valley Community Association put together, and they sort of give an idea of what. I'll just briefly talk about this one. It's got our information here on the front of it. It shows what it is we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the Aamodt Settlement a little bit, and domestic wells and the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System. And mainly we're going to talk about domestic wells and making an election if you want to be hooked up to the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System once it's near your home. So the backside of this just sort of gives you an idea of what we're going to talk about tonight. So the other 3 handouts is, there's a handout here that has sort of some explanation of some things you would want to know in terms of making it a settlement well election. And then there's also some handy website links on the back of the second page. The third piece of paperwork over there is also the domestic well election form. And so I'll get into what this is exactly. And so if you want water service, you're going to need to fill out this form. And I'll talk about all the facets of what that means, and then there'll also be some time to ask questions about all of this when I'm finished talking. Then the very last piece of paperwork is a set of instructions that the county made for the well election form. And so it might be useful to read this information too if you're needing some more information about filling out the form. So as I said, I'm going to use this handout to sort of structure the talk. So if you want to look at that, so it just says handout, a simple overview of the Aamodt Settlement. So the Aamodt Settlement was a way to settle the water rights of the 4 pueblos that are within the Nambé, Pojoaque, Tesuque Basin. And those 4 pueblos are Nambé, Pojoaque, Tesuque, and then San Ildefonso. And as a part of that settlement, it was agreed that they would build a water system, the federal government would build a water system that would serve both the Pueblos and non-Pueblo users that are within the basin. And if you've driven down in Pojoaque anytime recently, you've probably seen a lot of evidence of construction of that water system, including a water treatment plant. What the Office of the State Engineer does is we administer quantity of water and also priority of who gets the water, and also to some extent whether it might impair users if some users are using water. So that's probably the simplest explanation I could give you. And I think that's sort of the best overview to what the settlement is. So, and it resolved the adjudication that we had in the federal court over administering the water. And that adjudication started before I was born in the 1960s, and it was concluded with the settlement agreement, essentially. So the second bullet here is the acceptance and well election. So if you fill out one of these forms, you essentially are doing two things. You are becoming a settlement party, and then you're also stating your intention about what you want in terms of your participation in the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System. Now, the first thing I'd say about the form is you don't have to fill it out. It's not a requirement. So if you don't want to be a settlement party, you don't have to fill out the form. You could just go on using your well. There is a drawback to that in that if you don't become a settlement party, if there is a curtailment that happens for well users, your outdoor use will be the first use to be curtailed. If you fill out the form, then you become a settlement party and you have a better priority in terms of administration. And those are big what-ifs, and I can't predict those things, what if they were to happen. But it's not a requirement to fill this form in. If you do fill out the form, what you do with it in order to sort of get your intention on record is then you take it to the U.S. District Court, which it is located right next to the post office in Santa Fe, by the intersection of Seda Peralta and Washington Street. I don't know if you've seen it there. It's sort of a stone building that's right to the east of the post office. So in the form, and you can see that sort of in the second paragraph there, the settlement doesn't automatically require you to give up your well. You don't have to give up your well, and you also don't even have to formally choose how to participate. You cannot fill out the form. So if you want water service, you want to fill out the form. It's definitely you stating your intention about what you want to do. That's the only way that the folks who are building the project and all of the bureaucracies will know what you want. So the next paragraph here sort of talks about confirming your water rights. So in order to fill out the form, it will actually ask you what your water right number is, and it will ask you what your point of diversion number is. Those are generally the same thing. And in the Rio Grande Basin, they usually always start with an RG, and then they have a dash, or maybe just a space, and then it'll have a 5-number digit after it. And usually between 0 and 99,999, although they did run out of numbers, you might actually have a well that starts with a letter and then has 4 numbers followed if you have a really new well. You can look up your well information. If you haven't filed a change of ownership, that may be a little bit difficult. So if you filed a change of ownership with our office when you bought your property, or if you know that your well was adjudicated or anything like that, you could get on our website, and on the very top of the website, there'll be a link that says Water Rights Lookup. And you can click on that link, and it will take you into a portal where you can enter your last name and your first name, or you could put a star in the first name field and look up all the records that have your a last name that's the same as yours, and then you'll see all the well numbers that are associated with that name. So if it's in your name. If it's not in your name, then you may also want to try a previous owner's name. And if you're still having trouble, you can always call our office and we will help you find your number. So that's sort of the third paragraph there. So, and once you get into that, if you do find your well, when you do find your well, you'll find an abstract there. And the abstract will show you sort of how the well started. Sometimes it started with a permit. Sometimes it started, if it was a well that was drilled before the basin was declared, it will start with an order, generally, a court order. And because at that point there wasn't any paperwork that permitted any of the wells in the basin. But yeah, if you need help with any of that and understanding any of that, you're welcome to call our office. I did bring a bunch of business cards today. I didn't put them out on the table, but I'll put them out here at the end of the talk, and you can come get one if you need a contact. And then you can also look us up on our website, and you can, I believe you can look up our District 6 office too on the website, and they handle changes of ownership, and they also know all about this well election paperwork too. So the next portion of this is the third bullet is the settlement election options. So they're pretty summarized here, but I'm going to try to describe them in the best detail that I can. So the first option is to connect to the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System when water service becomes available. And at that point, when water service becomes available, you would just give up diversion from your well completely. Now, if you have a shared well, you only make an election per household, right? So if your neighbor and you share a well, they could make an election and you could choose to not fill out the form and just keep diverting from your well. If they were to choose the first option, they would stop diverting from the well, and when the water service came, they would stop diverting from the well and they would get hooked up and then you would keep diverting from the well. That's kind of how it works for multiple households. So well elections are per household, not per well. The second option here is what this calls split service. And so what you would do here is you would make an election to connect to the regional water system when water service is available, and then also keep diversions from your well and divert for outdoor use. And so I've written here in a note that in most cases you would transfer 0.3 of an acre-foot per year to the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System according to the rules and regulations that were promulgated with the settlement. The third option here is to become a settlement party and then keep your well long-term. So in this case, you wouldn't get a connection at all. You would keep your well and just keep using it in perpetuity. You would become a settlement party, so you'd have more protection in terms of that priority administration that I was talking about. And you would take a little bit of a reduction in terms, you might take a little bit of a reduction, I should say. It depends on if you've been using your well and if you metered it and how much you established in your metered use. The fourth option here is similar to the third one, where you would keep the well, but you would use it until the property was transferred. And you wouldn't have a water connection in that one too. And so under that option, the reduction is a little bit less if you end up taking a reduction, and that depends, like I said, on how much water you used. And so if you didn't use water or much water, or you didn't document your use, you'd be given a standard amount, and that standard amount won't be reduced. I don't think it will. Then the last option, the other part of that is, so even though there's a 10% reduction under it, or a 15% reduction under the third option, if you end up getting a reduction, But under the fourth option, the next property owner would have to connect to the system. So when the property changes hands, the next property owner would have to connect to the system. So, and as I've written here at this note at the bottom, it says specific limits on annual use depends on your well category, applicable settlement provisions, and NPT rules and regulations. And I apologize that it's all so complicated. It's how they wrote it all out. I didn't get involved in this until it was all, the rules were promulgated, the settlement was completed, and it's not easy to understand. So it's good to ask questions about it if you have questions. So the fourth bullet is about metering and reporting. And I put this here because, and also the association put it here, I think they wanted everybody to be aware of that under the NPT rules and regulations, and also our office put out a metering order in 2017 that pretty much said that everyone's well was supposed to be metered. And the deadline for that was actually October of 2019. It hasn't been heavily enforced. You might have been told about it if you came into our office and did some paperwork. Somebody might have mentioned it to you. So if you do meter, you know that you are supposed to meter per household, and then you're supposed to check the meter every quarter and fill out a form that has the meter readings on it, and then either email it into our office, or if you've done that, if you've sent in an initial reading on your well, then you can actually use our website tool to enter the readings. The reason for metering, other than that you're supposed to be doing it, is that if you're using water that's larger than that standard amount that I was talking about, it documents your use, and so you might end up with more water use if you sign up for the settlement agreement based upon what you were using. So this here says keeping accurate meter records helps ensures compliance and clear documentation of use and establishes historic beneficial use. And so that's something that you'll find all over in the settlement agreement. And historic beneficial use can be a standard number if you haven't metered, or if you metered and you didn't have very much use, you would have that standard number assigned to you. And that gets into the next bullet here, which is well categories matter. So that standard use is 0.7 acre feet per year for 3 types of wells, which those are pre-basin wells, those wells that were drilled before the basin was declared, and so that was November of 1956. Then the next category here are pre-moratorium wells, and those are wells that were permitted before January of 1983. And then post-moratorium wells are wells that were permitted after January of 1983. And what the moratorium is there was a moratorium on outdoor watering that was promulgated by the court. I was just in the 3rd grade at the time. And so anyway, the moratorium said that any new permits weren't allowed to water outdoors. Now, if you had a post-moratorium well and you interacted with our office much in the early aughts, you might have been what they called someone who participated in what we called the post-1982 well agreement. And so there are some wells that are like that are post-moratorium wells that are part of this well agreement. If you had one of those wells, or if you participated in the agreement, then you would have gotten your moratorium vacated, and you would have already gotten an order that gave you 0.7 of an acre foot per year. Those are kind of rare, but there's a number of them. I would say maybe 10% of the wells in the NPT Basin are like that. So the bullet here says this is why neighboring properties may have different limits. As far as adjudication goes or permitting goes, there's a whole cornucopia of amounts of water. that might be on an order or might be on a permit. Generally 3 acre-feet is the limit, but there might be all kinds of language depending on how you use your well. Multiple household wells, different eras of well, they all played into how wells were adjudicated. It's also rare, but some people didn't end up in the adjudication, so they might not have a well that has an order or a final decree addendum entry, and those just have a permit, and our office just administers them by the permit. Once you become a settlement party, there's sort of a new standard of rules that's based on that historic beneficial use amount and the standard amount that you would get if you didn't meter. If you metered and you exceeded that standard amount, you would get that amount with the reduction up to what your well was adjudicated or permitted for. So the next bullet here, what residents should do. So confirm your well file number with our office and their ownership status. And so you can do that by what I said before, is you can use that water rights lookup link that's on our website. And that's at ose.nm.gov. So, or you can call our office and we'll help you find it. Install, verify a meter and submit required reports. And this is probably the biggest one, is besides picking an option, is make a decision whether you want to become a settlement party or not. So if you're like, hey, this just isn't for me, I want to just keep doing what I'm doing, the only risk you take then is that if water gets really scarce and our office gets really robust in terms of enforcing compliance, your outdoor watering could be cut off, regardless of what type of well you have. Even if you have one of these pre-moratorium wells or a pre-basin well, your outdoor watering could get cut off. So that's the risk you take if you decide to just keep using your well and not fill out the form. If you decide to become a settlement party, fill out the acceptance form and then choose the option that fits your long-term property plan. So a question I get frequently is that, hey, I filled out the form, but I don't like the option I chose. Can I choose a different option? Yes, absolutely. So all you have to do is fill out the form again and go file it with the district court. So there's some resources here. The first one is the main page for the Aamodt Water Rights Settlement. That maybe has some useful links on it. I wouldn't dwell too much there in terms of the other links here might be more useful in terms of the tasks that were under the 6th bullet. The acceptance form, in case you don't have one or if you maybe mess up filling it out or something, or we run out of them over there, you can find that at the 2nd link. And then it's got the water rights lookup link here. Like I said, you could just go to our main page too, that's at ose.nm.gov, and you find a water rights lookup link that's at the top of the page. The meter information page is useful. There's about 2 or 3 sub-pages in there that have various things in them that would probably be useful in terms of making a decision about a meter. So there's another one here that this is probably one of the sub-pages of that meter information page, and it's metering standards and quarterly reporting deadlines. And then the last link is being able to submit the meter readings online. So in order to submit a meter reading online, you've got to fill out that form at least one time and either bring it physically into our office or email it into our office or mail it into our office. And then someone will get it entered into our database, and once you're in the database, then you can use this tool where you can just enter it online. And there's a Santa Fe County link here at the bottom, and they recently sort of revamped their page. It's in a lot better shape now in terms of the information on it, the links on it. So I encourage you to look at that too. And I think the hotline number might be on there. I don't know if it is. There's a all things Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System hotline number and
Got it.
what's the number there?
629-0450.
629-0450. And if you have questions about construction, that is a good number to call. The Bureau of Reclamation actually runs that hotline, and they have someone who answers it that then sort of distributes the calls depending on who the question's most appropriate for. So if it's appropriate, if it's about settlement well elections or about wells, it'll end up on my desk. If it's about something that the county manages, it'll end up on Scott's desk. And if it's about something that the Bureau of Reclamation manages, it'll end up with the Bureau of Reclamation project manager for the project, who's not here tonight. And this was mostly centered on domestic well elections, so we didn't get the Bureau in here tonight. And his name is Albie Day. So, but that is a good number to call if you need more information. You can also directly call our office, either District 6 office, or like I said, I'll make my cards available here, and you can grab those if you want one. So that's the handout. So I'm going to briefly go over the well election form too, so that you sort of have an idea how to fill it out if you're interested. So, like it says, it's acceptance of settlement agreement and notice of domestic well election. So you're both accepting the settlement agreement, you're becoming a settlement party, and then on top of that you are stating your intention about what you want to do with your domestic well as a settlement party. So the first field here is just the name of the settlement party, and you don't have to have, this doesn't have to match what your change of ownership says. You don't have to have a current change of ownership in order to fill this out. You can just put your name. So if the well has not been changed in your name with our office, that's no worry. You can just still put your name here and we'll figure it out. So then the next field is your mailing address. And then the field after that is the location of the property where the well is, or the household that's using the well. And then the next field here is your telephone number, and then your email address after that. And then here's these two fields that I talked about earlier. So the water rights file number, and you can find that on our water rights reporting system if you don't know what it is, or you can also call our office and we'll help you find it. And generally then the well number, and this is also sometimes called a point of diversion number, that's identical to the water rights file number. Sometimes it might have, if you had a replacement well or something like that, it might have an S after it, or it might have a pod 1 or pod 2 or something like that after it. So sometimes it's a little bit different. It's more imperative that you just get the numbers there for your base file number, though. That's probably the most important thing. Then the next section here, you essentially just check one of these 4 options, as I went through earlier. So the first one again is you get a full connection and you just give up use of the well. If the well's on your property and you don't share it with anybody else, you stop using it entirely. If you share a well, then you stop diverting from the well. The second option is that you connect to the system when it's available, and then you keep the well for using it outdoors, and you give up a portion of the water right, and that goes to the county. The third option again is that you become a settlement party, but you just keep using the well in perpetuity. And if you've been using a lot of water from the well that's over that standard amount, like I said, it's 7/10 of an acre foot per year for 3 of those well categories, and then for the post-moratorium wells that didn't enter the 1982 agreement, it's half an acre foot per year. You would just take that standard amount. You wouldn't see a reduction. If you metered and you were above that amount, say you had an acre foot per year, you would get a 15% reduction. So so you proved that your highest beneficial use was an acre foot per year, which would leave you with 8,500, so an acre foot per year. And then the last option here is you would keep using your well for your ownership of the property through the time that you own your property. You would only take a 10% reduction if you didn't end up with one of those standard amounts. So if you were using an acre foot per year, which is a little bit over that standard amount, and you chose option 4, you would take a 10% reduction, so you'd end up with 9/10 of an acre foot per year, and then you would be obligating the next owner to connect to the system. And then the last fields here are essentially you sign the agreement. And then, like I stated before, you take this form and you file it with the U.S. District Court. I think you can also mail it in, and if you don't want to file it in person, there are some instructions on the county's website about how you would do that. So that same link that I pointed out on this handout, I believe you can find the instructions of what happens if you go to the district court there. So I'm going to talk about these instructions just a little bit, not much. So there's a link here for the election form again. It's a different link than the one that's on our website. I think it's still active. I know, like I said, they redid their website, so I'm not sure about it. I didn't test it when I printed this form out, and this form, these instructions were revised to May of last year. So this explains a little bit those first 2 options, essentially if you want to become a part of the water system. It also has some explanation down here about the eligibility for the connection fund. So you can be, if you pick one of these 2 options, you're eligible for up to $10,000 of money to connect your home to the water system. If you make an election to connect, and it turns out that you're going to have to pay more than it's available from the connection fund, we cannot require you to pay that amount. You would just keep diverting from your well if you didn't want to pay the amount, or if you can't pay the amount, or you know, if some other alternative becomes available down the road. And so you can see here there's some more bullets about eligibility for the connection fund. And I'm not real familiar with these, so I'm not going to go through them, but if you have questions about them, you can ask Scott about them. Now, the last bullet here on the page, I want to point this out because I get this question a lot too. Is there any deadline to fill out the election form? No, you don't. There's no deadline to fill it out. However, the county has written here that they reserve the right to set a deadline after which no party making an election to connect will be eligible for funding from the connection fund. And at this point, they haven't set a deadline in that regard.
Tomas, can
Sure.
I make a comment
Sure.
on that?
Hi, everyone. That was loud. Okay. While there is not currently a deadline to make your well election, I receive those well elections when they are filed at the U.S. District Court, and I'm mapping those on the construction drawings for the project to determine where we are going to build our Phase 3 distribution lines. We only have a certain amount of money. We are not building a water line down every single road. I will build those Phase 3 distribution lines where I can serve the most customers. So it's important that you fill out these well elections very soon so that I can map that on the construction drawings, and so that you will have the best chance of having the water line come down your road to your home.
I think that's about it as far as what I had in terms of going through these forms. I'm really ready to answer questions. you want to come up here and state your question so that everybody can hear it?
Do you have an approximate cost of the water from the county for a household of two with normal use? I don't know what the cost of water is going to be.
Sure, we get that question a lot. And the system will be managed by the Regional Water Association, which will be comprised of the county and the 4 pueblos. And there will be a manager for that system. So while it's not a county system, the cost of the water will be in line with what other county customers pay. And you can find that online, what our current rate schedule is. It depends on what size meter you have, and then it's tiered by how much water use you have. Like the first 4,000 gallons are a certain price, then the next 4,000 are a certain price. So it's based on that, but it will be in line with what other county customers are paying.
One other question. If you go for option 2, the split use, so that you would hook up with the county lines and you still would have a connection with your well. Would it be possible and allowed to use well water while you're on the county system as you please? Because you might want to keep the city water just for drinking water and washing and cooking, and just for laundry you could use the well water. Is that possible?
So I believe, and I can check this for you before we're done here, I believe that the rules actually say outdoor water. So I don't think that is strictly speaking, I don't think that's allowed to use the well water for laundry. Now, yeah, I think that is what the rules say. And I'll look it up for you before we leave here.
Do you have a question? Thank you.
Can you elect to keep your well, or keep your well and then when you sell it, the buyer would have to hook up, but when you see the pipeline come down your road, change your mind and then decide to connect?
Yes, so that's very, very true, yes. So you could change your election at any time by filing another. So essentially you're saying that Scott's no longer worried about laying out the lines. It's already coming down your road. You decided you didn't want to connect for whatever reason, or maybe you made an election for the next property owner to connect. Yes, absolutely. You can change your election just by filling out a form.
Well, hold on, I need. So when those lines, those distribution lines are going in, they will be putting stub outs for the people who have opted to connect to the system. They'll be putting stub outs for the service lines going to your home, and a meter pit, a concrete, I don't know if it'll be concrete or something else, but a meter pit for where your meter goes. If you haven't filled out that well election form, that won't be on the plan, and you'll have to pay for that.
Is there a guesstimate of cost for that?
So the total cost right now for the stub out, the meter pit, the meter, 100 feet of line to your home, and the connection to your home is $8,000 to $12,000.
I have one other question. You said if there's a shared well that each household has to make the election. If I have a shared well with an empty lot, do I still have to make 2 elections now? Or is it up to the person who buys that lot?
You own the lot?
I own the lot, yes, but there's nothing on it, there's no household on it.
Yes, so I would make a separate election for that empty lot and just put the address of that empty lot.
And the other thing that will do for you is make sure there's a service connection for that lot in the future.
Question?
So my home is on a private road with about 20 other spread apart households. Where are you gonna tee off, put the stub in the case of private homes, private roads, I'm sorry. Do you go up the road or do you stop at Bishop's Lodge and then we have to do everything else?
So we will build phase 3 distribution lines on private roads to serve multiple customers. If you're the only one that is on that road that wants to connect, we'll pay for up to $10,000 to get it down that road to your house. Okay, if you live, you know, a quarter mile away to your home, we won't run a line a quarter mile just to connect to your house. If there's 3 houses there, we probably will that want to connect, but we can't. We have to be fair, right? I could hook 4 other homes up for what it's going to cost to hook you up.
Yeah.
So it will just depend. It's all a return on investment on how much money we can actually spend to hook up a home. But we would run a line, a distribution line down a private road if there were multiple homes on that road that wanted to hook up.
Okay, so then at that point, the resident has to pay for anything that goes from your meter pit into the houses.
No, that's part of the connection fund will pay for that from the distribution line to your home. That's what that's for specifically. Is from the distribution line to your home is what the connection fund is to pay for.
Okay. And so I'll talk with one of you subsequently about our specific case.
Okay.
But when do you anticipate that you'll be digging, you know, in this immediate
In Tesuque.
in Tesuque?
So the Bureau of Reclamation is in charge of design and construction budget and the schedule. So I'm not sure. It will be probably, depending on budget, it'll be at least 2029 before we're here.
That's not very far away.
No.
Okay.
Yep.
Mark, I have a question. If you elect to keep your well and you have an HBU allotment, when does the 15% reduction kick in?
Okay, I think that's a really good question. So that, it's not written down anywhere, but I've discussed this with my counterpart that's over in District 6, and we would probably not implement any of the historic beneficial use limits until everyone in your area has water service. That's probably when we would hold you to that amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? And the reduction then would occur?
That's right. And that reduction wouldn't only occur for those that are settlement parties. If you have an order that says you're held to historic beneficial use and you didn't fill out a form, we would hold you to that at that point too. Yeah, that's a real good question.
Couple of questions. What is the web page to determine whether or not my well is even eligible? I live in Tesuque, but looking at this little map, which I know isn't accurate, I'm not even sure I'm in the district. So how do I, is there a web page to plug in my well number?
Nambé Pojoaque Tesuque system? Yes, so
So if you don't know if you're actually in the Nambé Pojoaque to Tesuque administration system, the best way to do that again is with that water rights lookup.
Which
So,
one?
yeah, so
There's multiple web pages here. Which
this
one?
is the, on the second page of the handout. It is the third bullet down where it says resources. NMOSE water rights lookup. And so, or you could just go to our website at ose.nm.gov and click on the link at the top that says water rights lookup.
I was doing that on my phone and I didn't see that. But I'll try again.
Not a great website.
Well, and I was on my phone, so I'll try it on a bigger device. Another question is, I live on a private road, let's say 5 or 6 houses on that private road. That's $8,000 to $12,000 per household to get to the house from the stub.
So the 8 to 12,000 is to pay from the Phase 3 distribution line to your home. So the Phase 3 line with the stub out, with the meter pit, and the line to your house and the connection to your house. What will determine if that Phase 3 line even comes down your home is how many customers we can serve. If $10,000 will get it down your street and to your home to connect, then we would do that. But
You're asking if it's per household or just?
yes, and that is for each house. We'll pay $10,000 per each house.
Well,
and service connection.
first, so you stub out at the county line and before my private road, or at my private road, or you will come up the private road?
If there are enough homes
Right.
on the private road, we will run a line down a private road if everybody will grant us an easement.
And it is 8 to 12,000 per household?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Will you repair my road? Because you're probably going to go down the middle of the road, which is the logical thing.
We will return it to its original or better condition.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
thank you. We'll close that.
If a person purchases a property and an election has been made with a private owner, are you stuck with the election?
No, you can make another election. So now, this is a good question in terms of that fourth option, and I've mulled this over too, right? So what if somebody picked the fourth option and then it changes hands, and then the next property owner comes in and says, well, I don't want to connect. Yes, you could fill out the form again. There's a certain amount of risk when you keep doing that. Essentially, you might not get a connection if you kept doing that if you wanted one. Also, eventually we might change that if everybody started doing it. Right? But right now there are no rules about that. So yes, if you bought a piece of property and you didn't like the election that the owner before you made, yes, you could change the election.
Where do I look up to see what the current election is?
One more time, sorry.
Where do I look up to see where the current election is? Is it in your system at the water rights lookup?
So more current elections may not be in there. So if someone has made an election very current, it may not be in there, but most of them are imaged. And where they're imaged at is in the abstract. There's a link where you would click Get Images, and it's usually the one that's associated with the permit or the first order, the earliest in date-wise. And what you'll see is you'll see a little table that'll come up, and it'll show you all the documents that are associated with that link. And so there'll be an order there or the permit, And then there'll be another line item on the table that'll say tech report. And for whatever reason, that's what they put it under, Water Abstracting Bureau. And then if you click on that tech report, it will show you the election that's been made for the well. If there's not one there, and you think there might be one, you are also welcome to call our office and we'll look it up and see if an election has been filed for that well number.
And if someone has chosen the fourth choice, they're going to have it hooked up when they move, and there's no water system there to hook up to. I mean, how, 20 miles away, 3 miles away? Or you just aren't going to require people to hook up?
So in all cases, if the water system's not near you or the line isn't near you and an election form has been filled out, we will continue to administer the well by the permit or the order. We won't even administer it by the HBU amounts that are in the settlement. If you do have those conditions on your permit or order, they might play in if you made some other sort of water rights transaction. But for example, if I had an order that said 3 acre-feet or historic beneficial use, and the system was 20 miles away from me, I could keep on pumping the 3 acre-feet. I would need to be metered. I should be metered. But otherwise, yeah. And it also behooves you to be metered at that point because you would be establishing the historic beneficial use above the 0.7 if you were actually pumping the whole 3 acre-feet per year. Did that answer your question?
Primarily, it's,
So his question was about if water service isn't available, and I've made an election, I picked one of those 4 options, and water service isn't available, you would keep on using your well. And your well will be administrated by the paperwork that you have already for your well. And someone earlier had asked me a question about, I believe it was David asked me the question about when will we start imposing that historic beneficial use limit? And my colleague in the District 6 office and I both believe that the appropriate time for that limit to be imposed is when everyone around you, all of your neighbors have well service, or have water service from the Pojoaque Basin water system. Until then, you are welcome to keep establishing a historic beneficial use. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I live in Chupadero.
I live in Chupadero, and there is a water system that they just put in Chupadero, and it's a similar kind of setup where people give up their water rights to join the thing. So I don't imagine you're going to want to put a water line there because there's already one. They just dug a new well for it. But I understand that we're still being adjudicated by the settlement. And this question that you just mentioned, like you have X amount of acre feet, if you never, you're saying that there's, what I'm understanding is that no matter what my historical benefit, my historical HBU, if you're not running a water line down my road, you're never going to enforce the limit on my acre feet. Okay.
Can I speak to Chupadero for a second? Yeah, so good evening, everybody. My name's Justin Green. I'm the County Commissioner for District 1, and so thank you for coming out here today. Just to speak to Chupadero, Santa Fe County has been working with the Mutual Domestic in Chupadero to upgrade their system. So we've upgraded the tank and a new well, and we've partnered with your Mutual Domestic to get $5 million of a loan through the State Water Bureau, Trust board, thank you. We should be hearing about that in the next 3 to 4 months. And then Santa Fe County has an obligation under a resolution from 2012 to take over your system once that work has been done up there. So we're working in partnership to get that work done, and so a lot of folks might be here from 592. There's a point on 592 where once upon a time the water line was going to go all the way up to Rio and Medio, Chupadero, Vista Redondo, the resort and everything. But there's a cutoff point at some point where this project doesn't go up to there, and it certainly doesn't get to Vista Redondo, as my understanding, or Chupadero or Rio and Medio. But Chupadero does have this new system that is, we've got a new well and a new tank, and then we'll have new lines put in, hopefully, if we both get this grant here.
So the rules that were being described in terms of the line coming from Pojoaque, are they still going to apply to Chupadero because we have this county administered line?
That's a good question.
So there's a sort of gray area here. So you are subject to the Aamodt Settlement, but because this project won't get to you, you won't be held to that until someday it's possible that a line could be built up 592. There's no money to do that now, but the county has envisioned in 15, 20, 30 years, when this whole thing is built out and we're extending it into further areas, such as going up 592, that maybe Chupadero, that system that has all these new water lines, would get rid of their well and would tie into the Pojoaque system at that point.
I just have one other question, unrelated. Where is the water coming from that's coming down this line?
I can actually answer that. So I got a tour of this a couple weeks ago. Water comes from Rainy Wells, which is a system of aquifer or non-aquifer surface watered wells that are along the Rio Grande. I think there are 2 of them right now, 2 of them currently, and I think there's a capacity to build 4 at some point. 2 more total. They're in San Ildefonso, so right along the Rio Grande, just off the side of the Rio Grande. And then there's a big giant water treatment facility that you can see off the road off of 502. That is where the treatment is, and then you can see where the construction is being built off 502 to build those first distribution and transmission lines right now.
So I understand that there's going to be multiple wells along the system, just the ones down there, just the Rio Grande area, no other wells? Okay. My question was, who's responsible for water quality? I mean, I filter my systems. I don't have any filters today, but if there's something coming through the water, would I be responsible for filtration and cleaning that water that comes through the pipe?
So I'm not an expert in this, but the water that goes through the water system is all permitted through the EPA and the New Mexico Environment Department. And so if you run a public water system, you have regulations that you have to meet, and then you have standard testing that you have to do all the time. And so that's a lot more stringent than it's the same as any municipality has, right, to make sure that the water is safe and clean. Did that answer your question?
I also don't have all the answers, but I do know that the filtration system that is for the system filters out everything to a very high quality, including PFAS. So it is the top of the line filter. As far as that. I think that's what
We got about 5 more minutes, everyone, so more questions.
Where there's lines that go up private roads, will there be fire hydrants?
Will there be fire hydrants?
Maybe.
So the question was, will there be fire hydrants on the private roads? So there won't be, the fire hydrants will be going in, and it will be according to rural standards, which means 800 to 1,000 feet from the last house. So I wish I had a board or something to draw on, but the fire hydrant will go on the main transmission line. and then it will go, depending on how long your phase 3 distribution line is, it'll go along the transmission line. There will be a fire hydrant at the intersection where the phase 3 distribution line goes down the private road. Those will be spaced at 800 to 1,000 foot intervals. And then the fire hydrant will be placed within 800 or 1,000 feet of the last house on that road. So it's better when you can see it with a map, but there will be fire protection all along the system based on rural standards.
Does that mean every house is within 800 to 1,000 feet of the fire hydrant?
Every house that is on the system, that is hooked up to the system, yes.
Thank you.
All this is very helpful in what you're doing. I do have a couple questions, but one on the fire hydrant. Is the county required to keep that fire hydrant pressured up?
I don't know as far as required, but the line's going to have to be charged to be servicing the homes that are on it. And for example, the county just purchased the property at 37 Senda Vieja for the 1 million gallon water tank there, and half of that capacity is held in reserve for fire suppression.
And once a fire hydrant is commissioned, it cannot be decommissioned unless there's an emergency.
Well, it was just a sensitive point for me. My brother-in-law is on a water system in Texas now. It's in Texas, and the county set up, and his house caught fire. Fire department shows up. They go to they tap into the fire, and they're like,
That's why they don't decommission. But, I mean,
yeah. So that's a problem. And they said they just didn't want to. They weren't required to keep it pressured up. It was just an oddball saying the house burns up. But on the question, I'm trying to wrap my mind around all the different things. It sounds like if you don't participate in the settlement, you give up basically a financial benefit of up to $10,000. That's the number one thing you give up. If you go with a partial settlement, you get the $10,000 to cook up your water for their house, but you keep the well for the exterior, and the penalty there doesn't arise. I mean, as long as you meter and you get records, the penalty is going to be at 15% of what you use in that water. Or what happens down the road? Where is the penalty on that?
Okay, this is complicated, and so yeah, I thank you for asking this question again. It's probably best to understand it if I came up with an example. We'll leave the historic beneficial use part out of it for now, because I think that'll be easier if or that we'll say you didn't meter. You just had the standard HPU.
say you had half an acre foot and you connect and you want it, what would you have left for irrigation?
Okay, so if you had a post-moratorium well, you'd have half an acre foot. And so you decide that you want to connect and keep your well for outdoor use. So what would happen then is that you would make a connection, and then you would transfer 3/10 of an acre foot to the county, and then you would have 2/10 of an acre foot left to water outdoors. There wouldn't be a 15% reduction. The 15% reduction only comes in if you have an amount that's approximately greater than 82/100ths of an acre foot, and that's just how the math works out for that 0.7. So a 15% reduction on 82/100ths is 0.7. So once you get above that number in historic beneficial use, and that means you metered, and you can prove that you used more than that amount, then we would hit you with that 15%. Does that make sense? And then you would also have to transfer 3/10 on top of that. The 3/10 to the county on top of that.
I have one thing to add. I don't think
and correct me if I'm wrong, any of the reductions will be less than anyone will need to maintain a private garden, even a couple of apple trees if you have them. None of it's going to be so low that you can't water your garden outside, anything like that.
Did I answer your question?
One more question. Anybody?
Thank you. So, the reduction that you mentioned, the 15% reduction, is that based on your allotment or your historical beneficial usage?
It's based on your historic beneficial use.
So by metering your water, you're telling the county how much you're using, and then you say, I'm going to take 15% of it away?
Yeah, and I didn't make up these rules, right? But yes, so if you wanted more than that standard historic beneficial use, you would want to document, or you were using more than that standard historic beneficial use, you would want to document that amount through metering. And that, you know, essentially if you were using 3 acre feet, you would lose 4,500, right? Is that right? You'd lose 4,500, so you'd end up with 2.55. Yeah. So, and then if you were, you know, to the other gentleman's question, if you were going to also hook up the system, you'd give up 3/10 then on top of that. So you'd have the 2.55 minus the 3/10, and you'd have 2.25 that you could water outdoors with. That's an awful lot of water too. I mean, that's over 600,000 gallons.
And Tomas is using all the correct language, but we're not losing water. It's just you're not using the groundwater. So you're getting water from the system for your domestic use. You're not technically losing any water. You're just using less from groundwater.
One question I forgot. What about surface water? This doesn't affect surface.
Now, if you have a surface water right, it's administered completely separately. But this is all about domestic well elections. Yeah. And that's a good question, though. I think that often people think that it has something to do with that. But the form is purely about domestic wells and domestic well elections.
Thank you. Tomas? Scott, thank you. If you have a question, come on up. This is really it. We have to give the room back to the owners. I'm Mark DeCamp. This is David Doherty. We're with TVCA, and TVCA sponsored this meeting tonight.